Dead men tell no tales, but their ships speak volumes. Welcome to the Cursed Compass, where we explore the darkest maritime mysteries. In traditional Chinese belief, a soul unable to return to its homeland is cursed to wander untethered. They become what is known as a hungry ghost. And roughly 140 meters down in the pitch-black waters of the Tasman Sea, a shipwreck holds nearly 500 of them. Through the late 19th century, thousands of Chinese gold miners traveled to New Zealand. They lived in bitter, freezing conditions, carving out primitive stone and thatched dwellings right into the rock faces of Otago and Hokianga, all to earn enough money to eventually buy passage home. Many never made it. To prevent these men from wandering as restless spirits, Chinese benevolent societies in New Zealand organized a massive logistical effort in 1902. They paid to exhume the remains of 499 miners from 40 different cemeteries across the country. Workers meticulously cleaned the exhumed bones, wrapped them in calico bags, and sealed them inside heavy zinc-lined wooden boxes for the long ocean voyage back to the villages of southern China. This massive undertaking required years of planning and thousands of dollars. It was a highly organized, desperate rescue mission to secure peace for 499 human souls. The cargo was loaded onto a British steamship called the SS Ventnor, which departed Wellington in late October 1902. 9 elderly Chinese men sailed alongside the cargo, serving as dedicated attendants to care for the bones in transit. Just hours into the journey, the ship struck a reef off Cape Egmont. The hull was punctured and taking on water. But rather than immediately seeking safe harbor, Captain Henry Ferry made the arrogant calculation that his pumps could handle the flooding, and he decided to push the bleeding ship hundreds of miles northward toward a dry dock in Auckland. 2 days later, about 9 miles off the Hokianga coast, the pumps failed completely. The Ventnor sank rapidly, pulling Captain Ferry, 12 of his crew, and all 499 exhumed miners down 143 meters to the ocean floor. The men who had endured decades of freezing toil, who had been promised a safe return to their ancestral villages, were instead locked in a lightless, freezing purgatory at the bottom of the sea. But the sea did not keep all of them. In the weeks following the wreck, local residents walking the isolated beaches north and south of the Hokianga harbor began finding wooden boxes and calico bags washing ashore. Inside were human bones. These beaches belonged to the local Māori iwi, specifically the Te Roroa and Te Rarawa tribes. They had seen the wreckage offshore, and they understood exactly what they were finding on their sand. Māori culture places an immense spiritual weight on honoring the dead. Acting under the strict cultural principle of kaitiakanga, or guardianship, they gathered the foreign remains. With full ceremony and deep respect, they carried the Chinese miners into the hills and buried them in their own sacred urupa. For over a century, the families back in China mourned their lost ancestors, unaware of their fate. Yet on these quiet coastlines, a profound spiritual bond formed in the dark, connecting 2 entirely distinct cultures through a shared, quiet reverence for the dead. The story slept for over 100 years, until 2010.
A Maori man named John Albert was standing on a headland overlooking the sea when an unnatural, icy chill washed over him. He experienced intense visions of the lost ship, leaving the cliff completely convinced that the spirits of the Ventnor were commanding him to find them and bring them home. Albert organized a search, eventually bringing in a team of elite technical divers in 2014. Reaching the Ventnor required plunging 143 meters deep. The divers wore dry suits, breathed specialized mixtures of helium and nitrogen to avoid narcosis, and committed to agonizing 6-hour decompression stops in the freezing water for just 20 minutes of bottom time. When they finally reached the seabed, the psychological pressure was overwhelming. Surrounded by pitch dark, with only a flashlight cutting across the jagged, rusted iron, the divers couldn't shake the terrifying feeling of being watched, highly aware that they were trespassing in a mass grave. They brought a few small artifacts back to the surface, successfully confirming the wreck's identity. But breaking a century of silence at the bottom of the sea instantly ignited a fierce, unforeseen cultural war above it. When the New Zealand Chinese Association learned that items had been stripped from the shipwreck, they were outraged. They openly accused the dive team of plundering a sacred site and demanded that the wreck be left completely alone. John Albert insisted his mission was to salvage the bones and fulfilled the original 1902 promise of sending them to China. The Chinese Association, however, vehemently disagreed with him. To them, the sunken Ventnor was already a cemetery, an untouchable tomb that deserved absolute peace. This sparked a deeply poignant modern counterargument from Chinese New Zealanders. Today's descendants noted that their families had built lives in New Zealand. They had made this country their home. And because they belong here, they argued, their ancestors' bones are already home, even if they rest at the bottom of the Tasman Sea. It evolved from a maritime legal dispute into a profound theological question. Does a spirit's final resting place depend on the exact geographic coordinates of a village in China, or is it defined by the community that remembers and claims them today? Seeking final answers, the expedition team sent an advanced, ultralight boxfish ROV found to the wreck. It was small enough to navigate the tight spaces of the deteriorating hull and look directly inside. Just before the robot reached the seabed, an uncanny omen appeared at the surface. Two massive albatrosses suddenly landed on the water, turning their large eyes toward the crew, watching them in total silence as the camera probed a dark below. Slipping through a narrow hole in the hull, the robot switched on its high-definition lights. There, resting quietly on the dark interior deck, the camera illuminated an impenetrable field of skulls and disarticulated bones. The remains had long ago spilled from their wooden boxes. They were never going back to China. But after a century held closely in the dark deep and guarded fiercely by the people on the shore, the 499 hungry ghosts were no longer wandering. They had woven themselves forever into the spiritual fabric of the coast.